Hello, I am Dr. Mark Gloth, Chief Medical Officer for HCR Manor Care. Today, we are going to explore the mysteries of the virtual command center for our body, our brain. On initial inspection, the brain is nothing more than a jelly-like mass of fat and protein weighing in just around 3 pounds, 75% of which is water. As we look closer, however, what we find is that the brain is the most complex organ in the human body. As the virtual command center, it is responsible for receiving input from our sensory organs and for sending output to the muscles of our body. The brain has more than 100 billion nerve cells called neurons. In fact, there are more neurons in the brain than there are stars in the Milky Way. Each of these neurons makes somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 connections called synapses, equaling about 1 quadrillion individual synapses. The network is responsible for making over 1 million new connections every second and processing our thoughts at a speed of over 260 miles per hour. The sheer magnitude of the brain's connectivity is simply mind-boggling. It is through these connections that memories are stored, habits are learned, and personalities are shaped. The brain produces every thought, action, memory, feeling, and experience that make up our world. It is little wonder that, contrary to the popular belief that humans use just 10% of their brain capacity, we actually use virtually every part of the brain. In fact, most of the brain is active all of the time. As one might expect, being that it is the most complex organ in the human body, the brain takes the longest of any organ to develop and goes through more changes than any other organ. The brain is a constantly evolving organ that is constantly changing. In the first few weeks of development, while we are still in the uterus, everyone's brain starts out as female. In males, the hormone testosterone begins to masculinize the brain at around 8 weeks of development. During the first few weeks after our birth, a babbling baby utters just about every sound known and every known language. Indeed, the brain will continue to develop new nerve cells and new languages until about the age of 2, when it will have reached its critical max of brain cells. For the age of 2, we will have more brain cells than any other time in our lives. After we reach this critical max of cells, neural pruning will begin as a mechanism for fine-tuning and getting the brain wired up. That is when the brain begins to form the foundation of functionality and patterns that take us into adolescence. During adolescence, the frontal lobe undergoes a surge of development which establishes who we will become as an adult. That, along with the surge in hormones, begins to explain that creature known commonly as the teenager. As an adult, the most important trait of the brain is its ability to adapt to new experiences. Indeed, while general vocabulary and knowledge about the world often stays sharp through one's 70s, memory for names begins to decline as early as the age of 35. The ability to recognize faces and find car keys has already begun to wane by the 20s. While it shouldn't be of any real surprise, research indicates that the brains of adult men and women evolve very differently. For example, the frontal lobe, which is responsible for problem solving and decision making, and the limbic cortex, which is responsible for regulating emotion, are larger in women. Women also have about 10 times more white matter than men. It is also interesting to note that a woman's brain shrinks during pregnancy and can take up to 6 months to regain its full size. As we age well into our 70s and beyond, the brain should allow us to continue to be creative and productive members of humanity. In fact, while the studies of the brains of older people show some decrease in the number of neurons below the cerebral cortex, they contradict the once popular belief that adults lose an enormous number of neurons every day. The changes to cell processes that we see may represent yet another fine-tuning of our cerebral networks.